The dog that wasn't supposed to exist. Late autumn, 2022. The clock was nearing 11 p.m. when Ethan Cole was on his way to his modest home in Ravenwood. His shift as a security guard at the industrial warehouse had been uneventful, as usual, and the lonely, eerie drive along the old Redwood Highway was the price he paid for living in a quiet place far from the city's hustle and bustle. A flicker of movement near the dense pine tree fence caught his eye. He pulled over his old pickup truck. He was used to seeing raccoons or skunks, but the shape illuminated by his headlights was different. It was a dog. It wasn't an ordinary stray. It was a Belgian Malinois, but unhealthily thin, its ribs slightly visible beneath its mud-caked coat. In its eyes, which reflected the headlights, there was none of the usual fear of a lost animal, but a look of alertness and caution, as if it was studying Ethan intently. The dog didn't run as Ethan approached. He moved slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice. "It's okay, buddy. Everything's okay." When Ethan reached out his hand, the dog stepped forward instead of retreating. It didn't lick his hand or wag its tail. Instead, it lifted its front paw and placed it gently on Ethan's palm. It was a heavy touch, full of pent-up strength, more like a formal greeting than play. When Ethan lifted him into the passenger seat, he noticed something directly behind its left ear. It wasn't the usual identification microchip, the size of a grain of rice. It was a solid bulge the size of a fingernail, with a fine scar around it, as if it had been implanted recently. It was strange, but Ethan assumed it might be some advanced type of chip from a fancy veterinary clinic. He named him Shadow and brought him home. He gave him his old dog's food and water and wrapped a blanket for him on the kitchen floor. Less than an hour had passed when the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, he found 3 men standing on his doorstep. They weren't in full official uniforms, but wore matching dark tactical gear, without any badges or names. They carried themselves with a military bearing, their postures rigid, their gazes direct and sharp. "Good evening, sir. We're from the internal security team for the industrial zone. Did you pick up an animal on the highway tonight?" asked the tallest one, his voice flat and formal. Ethan froze. He didn't say dog, he said animal. And Shadow, who should have been asleep in the kitchen, was standing directly behind the door, slightly crouched forward, a low, deep growl emanating from his throat that Ethan had never heard from him before. It wasn't a growl of fear, but a warning. That was the moment he understood. They weren't from the police, and they hadn't said anything about a lost dog. They were looking for him specifically, the scar behind his ear, the way he observed everything. Shadow wasn't just a runaway dog. He was something valuable, and these men were willing to get him back. The real questions were, where did he come from? What had they been doing to him? And why were they searching for him with such urgency? Do you want to know what happened next? The silent agreement. Ethan froze in place, catching the man's words like bullets in the air. From the internal security team for the industrial zone. He knew there were research and military facilities in the area, but he had never had any dealings with them. His heart was pounding like a drum. The dog's gaze, Shadow's, was locked onto the 3 men, his low growl vibrating in the thin air between them. He was behaving like a trained guard, not a frightened pet. "An animal?" Ethan tried to sound natural, avoiding looking at Shadow behind the door. "No, I didn't notice anything. Just the usual skunks on the road." The lead man looked directly into Ethan's eyes, his cold gaze searching for any twitch of a lie. The silence lasted for agonizing seconds. Then, as if it had caught an invisible signal, Shadow leaned back slightly and suddenly stopped growling. But the tension in his body didn't disappear. It was like a coiled spring. "We're conducting a routine search. We lost a highly trained dog from our facility, Dangerous," the man said, his words carefully chosen. "If you see it, please call this number immediately." The man held out a pristine, white business card. On it was only a phone number, no name, no logo. Before Ethan could respond, the trio had turned and begun to leave, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they had come. Ethan closed the door slowly, leaning his forehead against the cold wood. His breath was uneven. "Dangerous!" The word echoed in his head. He looked at Shadow, who had now turned to look at him, his tail low, but his golden eyes seeming to say, You are safe now. But they hadn't asked for a description of the dog. They hadn't mentioned its name. How did they know to come here specifically? Ethan knelt down in front of Shadow. What happened to you, buddy? This time, when he reached out his hand, Shadow moved towards him, pushing his head into his hand, then licking it quickly, as if wanting to reassure him. Ethan noticed that the scar behind his ear was slightly red, as if irritated by something. Curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and examined the scar closely. It wasn't just a chip. Just under the skin, he could make out a tiny, rectangular shape with a minute black spot in the middle, resembling a small camera lens. This wasn't a normal tracking device. This was something for surveillance. Ethan shuddered. These men weren't looking for a lost dog. They were monitoring him. They might be listening to him at that very moment. He looked at Shadow, who was now staring at him, his eyes reflecting the phone's light in those golden depths. He didn't see danger, but trust. The dog's trust in him. In that moment, Ethan made his decision. He couldn't hand him over, not to these men. He turned off his phone abruptly. "Okay, Shadow," he whispered into the darkness. "Let's play a game." He went to the closet and pulled out his old camping backpack. He quickly filled it with a water bottle, some cans of dog food, a light blanket, and some cash. Then he took a small screwdriver from the tool drawer. He returned to Shadow, who was watching his every move with intense interest. "This might hurt a little, my friend, but it's necessary." With a steady hand, using the tip of the screwdriver, he scraped the scar deeply enough to damage the delicate circuitry beneath it. He saw a small spark, and then a faint red light he hadn't noticed before went out. He wasn't sure if this would stop the tracking or the surveillance, but it was the best he could do. He looked out the bedroom window at the empty street. He knew they would be back, and when they returned, they wouldn't be polite. In the pitch blackness, with Shadow pressed close to him in the passenger seat, Ethan started his truck's engine without the headlights and pulled out from the back alley, away from the main road, heading towards the dark mountains surrounding Ravenwood. He didn't know who those men were or why they were hunting Shadow. All he knew was that this dog had placed its trust in him, and now he had to be worthy of it. The journey into the unknown had just begun. Do you want to know what they will find in the mountains and the surprises waiting for them on the way?